I'm just going to speak about a little bit of scoping here first and then hand over to our product owners for detail on this stuff. But this is talking about product goals for the year. So people that are interested in what we're up to and why. So that's what we've got. So the general theme of what's going on is a lot of work around implementing things at scale. So we have a lot of larger ministry projects that we're working with, and we want to make sure that those are all successful at the scale that they are, which could be anything from the systems handling larger volumes to respecting that larger projects have different roles and making sure that everyone does what they're there to do in a way that we have high engagement rates for CHWs. So in numbers here, I mentioned ministries of health. So we have 6 of them that we're working through. And in terms of carrying activities, we're going from where we're at 25 million to getting to 38 million and getting our user numbers up from 75,000 to about 105,000. And that again is really just scoping what you'll see here in a few moments, where everyone's going to be talking about different features in different areas we'll be working in, but all of that is working towards this concept of large scale and addressing that.
Hi everyone, I work with the infrastructure focus working group to innovate on ways that we can creatively manage deployed CHT instances. So I wanted to quickly go through a couple of the objectives that we in the infrastructure focus working group are looking to do this year. So some of this will be done on this quarter, but some will probably be done on subsequent quarters. The first was we wanted to cascade SRE-related CHT documentation. The idea here is to make it easy for MOHs and sysadmins who are trying to deploy CHT to be able to do so in an easy manner. So this is particularly related to our new deployment workflows, whose documentation is still under development. The second thing that we wanted to focus on was to be able to ensure that community members and technical teams within our partner groups are able to independently manage and deploy CHT. So we do work hand in hand with a lot of MOHs and partners to assist them in CHT deployments. But the goal behind this is we want to enable them even more to be able to even easier and using a lot more automation run CHT in their environments. The third thing we wanted to look at was TCO. TCO is the total cost of ownership. We've had a lot of questions and queries about what it takes from a financial resource perspective, from a human resource perspective, to run and deploy CHT. And so one of the objectives that we're looking to fulfill this year is to make it clear on what the total cost of running CHT is. The fourth, we wanted to make sure that large-scale CHT deployments are highly available. This has been a huge focus within the team from last year, and we've actually, apologies for my son here, and we've actually been investigating and implementing, as I mentioned a little earlier, new workflows to make sure that any CHT deployments, particularly for the scale that Craig mentioned, are able to reliably run. And so I think as we move on through the year, we'll be able to highlight some of these methodologies, some of these tools and platforms that we're using, and cascade this to the larger community. Then we also wanted to focus on InfoSec, making sure that deployment of CHTs is secure. So it means that any attacks on this CHT deployments would have some sort of mitigation, and there will be some sort of resilience in terms of how these CHT deployments are able to handle typical attacks that would be made on any publicly accessible platform. So another focus area was making sure that we're able to support about 25,000 users. So we have seen that a number of the large deployments that are being made to support various MOHs have about this, they have an upper limit that looks at having support for up to these kinds of numbers. doesn't mean that we aren't looking at supporting even higher numbers of users. That's still in our pipeline, but this was our target for this coming year. And then lastly, another key item that we wanted to focus on as the infrastructure focus working group was being able to detect malicious activity. So this is related to the InfoSec point that I made a little earlier, but the point was in assisting MOHs and partners to be able to detect some of this malicious activity targeting deployments, and to prescribe tools and ways in which this can be mitigated. So these are really the high level. So these are really the high level objectives as the infrastructure focus working group that we sought to implement this year. It's not everything. There are nuanced, smaller items that we will be working on, but this largely highlights what we as the infrastructure focus working group have our eye on.
So for us as the ecosystem focus working group, we'll have a couple of goals we're working on this year. I'll rush through these goals. The first one is on documenting. We want to have this documentation in high quality. That would mean that our users within the ecosystem are able to rely on our documentation. The second one would be on impact. As Craig mentioned, that the idea is basically to have maximum impact, and we want our team to convey this, to convey our work within the ecosystem. And then for the engineers, the software engineers, the app developers, we want them to have a seamless process when working with the enhancements that we've made. Say, for example, could be in terms of dashboards, or could be in terms of connecting these systems to other systems based on any standards that we have made. Also, in terms of interoperability within the ecosystem, the digital health ecosystem. So there are a lot of systems within our ecosystem. Say, for example, could be facility-based systems such as OpenMRS, which I'll have the privilege to talk about much later. We're able to interoperate the CHT with the systems. And then lastly, in terms of the data that we collect, we'd like the users to make use of this data in a meaningful way and make data-driven decisions. These are through use of dashboards that we periodically make enhancements. So for example, we are working on a feature to improve on how data is transferred from CouchDB to Postgres, which I'll talk a little bit more about that in the ecosystem update.
My name is Nekesa, and I lead the community team. We have 4 big buckets of things that we are considering priorities for 2024. And in keeping in the theme of my colleagues who've spoken before me, our number 1 is documentation. And it's really fantastic how that's come together, and that this is really a priority across the board. And so on our end, luckily we're a small team and we can distribute this work pretty evenly. And so Mariachana is leading our documentation efforts, and we'll be working with the other focus groups to make sure that we get this right. I know a question might be your open source, and documentation should be the first thing you've been doing anyway. So why a focus on documentation now? But as Craig mentioned right at the beginning, there's a lot of scale already in place, and there's a lot more scale planned. And what this means is that there's been lots of changes in what we're documenting and how we're documenting it. And so focus for the community team is just ensuring that the documentation that you get to use is always relevant, reliable, and up to date. And that's the work that Mariachana is going to be leading. These are the efforts Mariachana is going to be leading. We want to make sure that the documentation works for the diverse community that we have. And so you'll increasingly see that this documentation, not just for the technical community, but for the non-technical members of the community as well. We want to make sure that we live up to this promise that the documentation is relevant, reliable, and up to date. And so our ask for you, the community, is that you constantly give us feedback. As you go through the documentation, you'll see right at the bottom of each page, I think that there's the option to give feedback for that. Also, you could give us feedback on the forum. Our second big thing is governance and accountabilities, making sure that the structures are in place. And I'll be leading this body of work. And basically what we're working to do here is just introducing a very clear, inclusive decision-making process. And also to refresh our code of conduct, just make sure that as a community, we understand how to work together, respect each other, and use the forums that are available and the resources that are available to us. So what you can expect here is conversations on how we include you more in critical strategic decisions around the CHT. And also this will be the avenue through which we get a lot more feedback, hopefully from you as a community, on whether the community is working for you, what your expectations are, any opportunities and resources that you feel that aren't currently being provided that you would love for the community team to provide to you. And so our ask here is, again, just if you could keep engaging on the forum, on the Roundup calls, or if those don't work for you, you could also just hit us up on our emails to give us some feedback around how you'd expect for the governance and accountability to work. Third is ensuring an inclusive, diverse, and engaged community. And this work will be led by Anthony, our community manager. And here we're really looking at continuing our community segmentation, making sure that the way that we deliver works for different types of community members. We want to know who we have, and then we also want to know who we want to introduce into the community. We want to open up more avenues through which you're able to collaborate and also share your knowledge. You'll have seen that we already started this. One key way we've done this is through the technical webinar that we had a couple of days ago that was really well attended. So we're very grateful for that. And this will also be the avenue through which we try to reinforce the culture of contribution. I hope majority of you are aware that we have a contributor handbook. And so this is really going to be the avenue where we try and get you to contribute more to the CHT, to the core and other attributes of the CHT as well. And then finally is that we want our community members to independently learn how to build and operate CHT apps. And Niraj, who's based in Niraj, who's our developer advocate, is going to be leading this work. So this is everything around our CHT Academy. I hope that majority of you have come across it. You know that we have some curriculums in there. We have our introduction to CHT. We have an interoperability curriculum. As Reagan mentioned, there's an SRE course under development, and we hope to be able to share that with you soon, or rather sometime this year. There's also going to be non-technical courses potentially put in there. We're still ideating what this could potentially look like. And so our ask here is obviously that you use the CHT Academy and also tell us what you'd like to learn if what you've learned is not already on the Academy. This is also going to be the avenue where we recognize and reward our members. And so here you can think about certifications around refining and publicizing how we work with technical partners, and also the opportunities that are available to the technical partners that we work with at MEDIC. And so this is it, and we really look forward to working with the community to make sure we achieve this in 2024.
And I want to chat about the Allies Focused Working Group. You'll see a theme here that we're also going to be focusing on quality documentation. It's important that folks know how to use the tools that we write and know how to configure the CHT for their deployment. There's going to be a focus on cybersecurity in 2024, also mentioned earlier. This specific one is looking at supply chain confidence. So when you think about pulling in NPM packages, you want to make sure they're all up to date. CHT4's architecture allows for easier updates based off the modularity of the Docker images, so this is well poised to be easier. We'll also be working with reducing total cost of ownership such that it's on par with other health systems that are out there, and this encourages national adoption such that it's a level playing field where there's not one advantage for another one over the CHT. We'll be looking toward the first big effort that we're going to be focusing on for Allies is that app developers can innovate without CHT core changes. So a great example of this will be the user management tool that's coming out of MEDIC that we'll be looking to incorporate into a plugin-like infrastructure. The first step in that for us is going to be focusing on authentication so that the authentication process is a bit more smooth. We want to make it easier for technical partners to confidently operate CHT apps, and this is going to be around ensuring that the process for using the CHT is well documented and that they know their deployments will succeed when they are pushed out. And finally, we want to make sure that engineering teammates work effectively. And this is primarily around reducing the time of bug fixes being found and then pushed to master so that they can be put in a release, as well as the time for a feature to be created and then put out into release. So when you reduce that time, the more frequently the CHT comes out, then obviously folks are working more efficiently because their work's being put out for general available use.
Some of our high-level goals for the year, obviously the care team is really focused on how CHWs and supervisors are interacting with the CHT. So along with that, the number one thing is really making sure that CHWs are satisfied with the client performance, how fast things are in the CHT for them. The second is relates to supervisors, making sure that supervisors are able to keep CHWs highly engaged. So we're going to focus really on enhancements around supervisors, also making sure that CHWs can solve tech issues quickly and making sure that they have confidence in the security of their apps. So in the interest of time, here are a couple of links where you can chime in on these topics.
Allies is going to be focusing on publishing documentation for user management at scale, and this is primarily around securely handling passwords, as well as how to disseminate credentials. And when we think about using the user management tool that we just saw, that will allow you to work well with that and have a list of procedures and best practices that you can follow. And I realize I forgot the order of slides, so there's a slide we'll skip ahead here. So the other thing that Allies is working on is the ability for authentication for external apps, which we're getting closer and closer to calling plugins. So that will come in the form of OAuth 2, and then later for OpenID Connect. This will allow the experience of logging into the CHT to be substantially more smooth. So in the demo that we saw earlier with user management, the login process would be take you to the CHT, and if you need to log in, go ahead and log in, and then push you back to that external integration. So this will use the standard APIs that will be available for future versions of the CHT that enable this authentication. We've already covered user management best practices. This will be upcoming, hopefully this week, but maybe next week, as I see this week is already slipping away from us. And then finally, yes, we're working on releasing soon a ability for deployments that want to enumerate all the users in their system and ensure that they're up to date with their version of Android and CHT Android. So Android obviously is the operating system the phone runs, but then sometimes when you're preparing for an upgrade for CHT, you want to know what version of CHT Android they're running. So this will be an authenticated API that easily gives you back a list of all your users and all their devices. So it will greatly reduce the effort needing to go and like scrape the data out of Couch to PG or other telemetry docs. This will be a one-stop shop for that list.